Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday morning. My name is Luigi Del Puerto. I'm the associate publisher and editor of the Arizona Capital Times. The Arizona Capital Times covers state government and Arizona politics. A lot of people refer to us as a nonpartisan, independent, non-ideological newspaper. I kind of refer to ourselves as an equal harassment newspaper. And so thank you for joining us this morning. If you're not subscribed to the Arizona Capital Times, please let me know. We'll get you squared away. I want to thank Grand Canyon University for sponsoring this morning's discussion. Grand Canyon University has become one of the most innovative and forward-thinking universities in higher education today. Enrollment on its Phoenix campus has exploded in the past 12 years, growing from 1,000 traditional students in 2008 to more than 22,000 today. That's not counting another 85,000 working adult students studying online. GCU has invested $1.5 billion into its academic infrastructure during that time, while also freezing tuition costs on its ground campus for 12 straight years. That, by the way, is unheard of in higher education. Joining us today is the architect of that remarkable transformation, GCU President Brian Mueller, as well as the university's Provost, Hank Radha, and its Vice President of Operations, Sarah Boeder. And let me introduce each one of you. Brian Mueller joined Grand Canyon University in July of 2008. He ushered in a new era for the institution. He transformed GCU from a financially troubled university into a $5 billion institution that has become a driving force in higher education today. Since joining GCU, the university has experienced, as I mentioned, unprecedented growth. The enrollment on the Phoenix campus increased from 1,000 to 22,000 students. Enrollment on its online platform has grown to more than 85,000 students. Mr. Mueller also still oversees a $1 billion expansion of the campus through new technologies, classrooms, laboratories, athletic facilities, and student amenities over the last dozen or so years. He's a former teacher and coach at the high school and small college level, and he also spent nearly 24 years at the Apollo Group, the parent company of the University of Phoenix. Brian, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Are you just at home, sir?
Yes, I am at home. I'm getting very, very used to these 7-8 Zoom meetings on a daily basis, so I feel a little bit experienced, actually.
You're an expert now. Like most of us have suddenly become experts on Zoom.
And I'd like to lose that talent and go back to meeting with people face to face, and we'll hopefully be able to do that soon.
Also joining us this morning is Sarah Boeder. Sarah is the Executive Vice President of Operations at Grand Canyon University. Ms. Boeder is a higher education leader. She's skilled in organizational leadership, operations management, coaching, analytics, and event management. She joined GCU more than a dozen years ago, or nearly a dozen years ago, where she oversees athletes in 2008, right?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
You joined GCU back in 2008, is that correct?
Yes, right along with Brian, shortly after Brian Mueller joined.
All right, thank you. She oversees admissions, academic counseling, and finance counseling, among other responsibilities at Grand Canyon University. She also served as Executive Vice President of Student Services for the University of Phoenix online campus. She earned her bachelor's degree at the Arizona State University and her master's at the University of Phoenix. Sarah, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks.
And finally, we have Dr. Hank Radha. Dr. Radha is the provost of the Grand Canyon University. He joined GCU in December of 2010. He has extensive experience creating systems and organizations to educate and serve people based on scholarship and best practices. He has worked with national, private, public, and non-for-profit organizations. He earned his Bachelor's of Arts degree as well as his Master of Science in Community School Psychology from the College of New Rochelle in New York. He earned his PhD in Clinical Psychology from the Union Institute in Ohio. He has served on numerous boards, has presented at a variety of conferences and events, and has been published in academic journals. He previously served in senior management positions and co-founded the John Dewey Academy, which is a nationally recognized therapeutic therapeutic college preparatory school for high potential at-risk youth. Hank, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so I guess let me start with GCU's on-campus and online programs. Brian, let me start with you. What are the obvious difference in my mind is that one is online, the other is on campus. But flesh that one out for our viewers. What's the difference in terms of their education, in terms of their experience?
Well, the university has 9 colleges. We have over 240 academic programs, and those about 175 of those 240 programs are offered both on ground to traditional students and to working adult students online. And those programs that are offered to both, the learning outcomes are the same. The students have to achieve the same outcomes, whether you're an online student or a ground-based student. The traditional campus ground students, they're going to attend class the way you would at a traditional university 2 or 3 times a week for an hour or 2 each time. And so they're going to have the same experience many of us had. In addition, however, their class is put online. So they can interact through our system with their faculty members between class sessions. They can submit assignments that way. They can get them returned that way. So it's a classroom-based instructional system, but it's very much supported by our online learning system.
So it's kind of integrated is what you're saying. They are on campus, but the platform that they are using is effectively the same platform that your online students are using.
Exactly. The students that are totally online are working adults. Their average age is 34, 35 years old. They're mid-career professionals. They're raising families. They're going back to earn bachelor's or master's degrees. And being on a campus for the socialization part of it is not as important for them as the 18 or 19-year-olds. And so it's a very rigorous academic experience. It's delivered over our online platform, which is something we've built that has tremendous capabilities and tremendous flexibility. And so they have to achieve the same outcomes as the students on our campus. They go about it just a little bit differently because of the delivery model and because who they are as learners. And so some of the assignments, some of the activities will be a little bit different depending upon whether you're a ground student on our campus and typically 19 or 20 years old versus if you're a working adult 34 or 35 years old and doing it exclusively online.
How do you, let me pull in Sarah here. So Sarah, really the goal is not necessarily to replicate the on-campus experience that, a young student, 18, 19, 20-year-old might have, and try and replicate that for your online platform. Because as Brian mentioned, the online platform is really geared for folks who are, older, right? Probably already in, working and trying to go back to work, or, professionals that are trying to advance their academic experience. I think you're on mute, by the way, Sarah, if you can unmute yourself.
Yes. So yeah, exactly what Brian just shared.
So the experience are not necessarily the same, but the educational experience, the learning part of it, it's just as rigorous as the on-campus.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sure Hank can probably talk a little bit more about the level of rigor between both modalities.
Yeah, let's go to Hank then. Hank, what's the how do you ensure then that the experience that you have in a classroom in which you have a professor that can immediately sort of interact with you, that learning that rigorous standard is then translated into an online platform?
Sure. Well, I think, thank you. It starts really with the design of the program. So we design our programs with our faculty and industry experts to make sure we identify the learning outcomes of any program. And then those are titrated down to the very specific coursework. So the learning outcomes in a course, whether you're doing it online or on the ground, are the same. Where the difference becomes is if you're teaching a master's degree student in education, they've been in the classroom for 10 years, the faculty in those classrooms might use assignments more that draw on their current experience and tie them with the theoretical models that we want them to learn and to come to grips with as they improve who they are as a teacher. In the ground environment for a traditional student, 18 to 19-year-old, we want the same learning outcome. We want them to know the theory and the content, but now for them, we have to infuse some practical experience. So we would come up with some kind of project-based assignments that maybe have them interview people in schools that are working in schools. So they learn the same theoretical model, but for them, we have to really try to help them understand what is the practical implications of that in the classroom. So through practicums or visiting classrooms or interviewing teachers, they would understand that. So it's really the same learning outcome, but how you get there really depends on what that student needs, whether it's more theoretical or content knowledge, or whether it's more of a practical view on that theoretical content.
So you have 85,000 online students right now, and I'm presuming you can scale that, increase that capacity to what exactly? I'm just curious. If there's a ceiling, what's the ceiling for that?
You know, there's not really a ceiling from a numbers standpoint. The ceiling in higher education going forward is not going to be nearly as much what your platform is, the size of your campus. It's your ability to understand where the economy is going, and where the jobs are going to be, and developing programs that can help people access jobs and build careers. And so for us, as we look at our online students and our ground students, we're not thinking about so much the ceiling from the standpoint of number of students we can serve. It's the number of students we can serve effectively. And so the people that are going to be successful going forward, I think, are people that are identifying very carefully, where's the economy going? Where are the jobs going to be? How do we develop academic programs that help people access those jobs? And how do we deliver that education in a very rigorous academic setting, but in a very cost-effective way, so that students aren't going into huge debt to access the education? One of the things that we're very concerned with at the university, whether ground or online, is delivering excellence that is affordable, because every time universities raise tuition, diversity goes down. And one of the things that is key to America and making the American dream accessible for everybody is to keep college education cutting edge, keeping it in a place where students are going to get real skills that lead to real jobs to build really good careers, make it affordable so everybody has access.
And I want to just remind our viewers and listeners, if you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Grand Canyon University's leadership team, Sarah Boeder, Brian Mueller, and Hank Radha. And I would encourage everybody, if you have questions, please send them in via our chat room or via the Q&A section. Don't hesitate to ask questions, and we'll try to get to as many as possible within the time that we have. So we're in a lockdown. Arizona has been since what, the middle of March, something like that. The governor first really shut down the dine-in portion of the restaurants, and then as days wore on, it became he decided to shut down large sections of our economy as a result of COVID-19. Obviously the purpose is to try and curb the slow of this virus, and as a result, schools are also shut down. And it became apparent that the universities would have to follow suit. And so I want to ask Sarah, because you have 22,000 students on campus, right? Talk to us about that transition. A couple things that I have in my mind, like how do you ensure 22,000 students have all the, let me back up a bit, to do an online education, you need a computer, right? And internet. Same problem that K-12 students are experiencing right now in this environment. But how do you ensure you have 22,000 students suddenly that they have a computer to begin with, and they have Wi-Fi?
So we did have a few situations where there were some challenges with a few students, and when appropriate, we provided students with hotspots if they needed, so that they would have the internet access. And also, when we moved all of our employees to work from home, we had quite a few student workers who were able to take a GCU issued laptop home. And that helped also with any students who didn't have a computer. So from that standpoint, we were able to hit a majority of those students. And of course, the campus technically is still open. And so students who needed and were able to, they could drive to campus if they needed assistance.
I'm sorry, you were saying that you're already providing, or classrooms already have computers, right? And so is that what happened? They were able to take them home then?
So we have some students, if they had an issue with computers, it just happened to be that the ones who did were already student workers for us. And so we were able to issue them. They were already going to be working from home. And so they already had access to a computer, whereas before they may not have.
So is the bulk of your students then, they already have computers at home? And
I
they
would
have
say
internet
both of
access.
them.
Yeah.
Yes. This is a small number of people.
A small number of people who didn't have any. And so
Yeah.
you had to provide them that. So, you know, physically moving 22,000 people out of an environment in which they enjoy being with their classmates, they enjoy being with their teachers, they like the campus activities, they like the soccer game. Sorry, I say soccer because I'm partial to playing soccer. But you have all these activities that suddenly have to cease. How did you have to deal with that?
So I don't know, and Brian, do you want to jump in on this one?
Okay,
And talk a little bit about that?
Sure. You know, we had a big advantage. We had 4 weeks left in the semester. We shut down the campus just prior to spring break. And all of our classes on the Phoenix campus are already set up online. And so students were oriented and had used the system, knew how to use the system, were using the system. Faculty members were using the system, and their classes were set up that way. And so it was a very easy transition for us. The faculty members worked extra during the spring break to put some final touches on their last 4 weeks of instruction because they were going to be using the system versus the students coming to the classroom. But the reality is that the students were oriented, they were already set up on the system, they had a login, they knew how to use it, as did the faculty members. And so we were very, very pleased with the last 4 weeks of instruction. In fact, our completion rates were tremendous. Our grade distribution was tremendous. We didn't have to go to pass-fail. We did end of course surveys, and the students responded very positively to what happened in that last 4 weeks, which is going to open the eyes of a lot of people in terms of how much you can accomplish in an online environment if you have a good system, if people have been trained to use the system. It's opened up a lot of people's eyes. So now, did the students miss their classmates? Absolutely. Did they miss the activities? Grand Canyon has an extremely vibrant, active campus, and especially for the seniors that didn't get to go to graduation, didn't get to say goodbye to their classmates. There was a lot of sadness there. But from an academic perspective, the important thing is we got to finish, and they got to finish, and finish at a very high level.
You mentioned you didn't have to go to pass-fail, and I suppose and please correct me if I'm wrong here, and maybe Hank can weigh in on this one. You didn't have to change the way you graded your students. Is that correct?
Hank, why don't you handle that?
Yeah, exactly. What we did from the very beginning is we made sure that the faculty and the students were prepared for the transition. And then we monitored on a weekly basis, again, because we have everything in our systems and our computers and our analytics. So we monitored the participation of the students, the involvement of the students. Our deans were meeting with our faculty on a regular basis. We were making phone calls with Sarah's team and our student support team to the students. And then we did a survey to make sure that people had made the transition. And then, of course, we did analytics on the grades as the final grades came in. And we're very excited that the GPA, the grade, the variance from A to F was actually very similar to last year at this time. As a matter of fact, there was a slight improvement. And then the scores that the students gave the faculty actually increased. So I think our faculty came together with the students in a very innovative way and made sure that the outcomes, so we were very pleased by that.
So you were immediately measuring both student engagement at the same time. You were tracking the grades, and you were tracking how students are perceiving, this new online environment insofar as how their professors are doing.
Yes. And there's a student support team between, again, Sarah's team and the colleges that the minutes a student, we noticed that there was a concern the faculty had about a student maybe not participating as much or not involved. Phone calls were made. Students were reached out to and said, how are you doing? What's going on? Well, I was driving back across country. That's why I missed the first couple days there, but I'm back in class now. I'm home again, or I need a hotspot, to help. So we just made sure that the resources were there for those students. We identified them early. The team came around them and supported them.
Sarah, what sorts of problems did you actually see from your students? And I asked the question because I have an 8-year-old at home, and the home is like this one environment where he's supposed to go play, have fun, goof around, and really not have to worry about schoolwork. All right, and suddenly we're thrust into this environment in which I'm homeschooling him full time. And he's kind of studying full time, or for most of the day, he's had to really concentrate doing that. I understand he's 8 years old. He'll be 9 soon, but and that's different than, your college student, right? But I do wonder what kinds of stresses and problems you saw, from your students during this transition.
So for the most part, the students were obviously extremely familiar with the platform. So that part went relatively smoothly. And what we encountered, as Hank kind of alluded to, we have a unique service model for students. We have each student works with an assigned student services counselor. And that's someone that they've been working with since they started our program. So they have a really well-established relationship. They meet regularly with them. It's very normal for their student services counselor to reach out multiple times a semester to check in on them. They'll swing by the office and say hi. So because of that strong relationship, we found most of our conversations were more oriented to just the stress of the COVID-19 pandemic. What's going on? I've never been through something like this. And so our employees were really able to connect with them more on that emotional kind of support side of it and help them understand, hey, we've got to keep moving forward. Progress is important in this time. Let's use this time away to your advantage. And what can we do to kind of set you up for long-term success? So from my perspective, it was just a continuation of a relationship that was already well established and ready for that next level discussion.
And Brian, does it help? I don't know exactly what your classroom sizes are, but I'm presuming that the smaller your classroom size is, the more manageable and the more seamless the transition can be. Like, tell us a little bit about, how big are your classroom sizes and whether that, helped or not. And I ask the question because if I'm imagining a classroom with the size of maybe 100, students, like kind of lecture type of a program, then, suddenly transitioning all of that becomes a bit difficult, not just for the students, but also, quite frankly, for the teacher and the teacher assistants.
Yeah, that's a great question. And people ask frequently about the quality of online education, and I've been involved in it now since the mid-90s. And I say, it's really not a fair question because there's a lot of ways to do it. One of the things about the university, Grand Canyon University, is that our average class size on our ground campus is less than 30, and our average class size in our online campus is around 16. And so we have built an academic learning model that's really based on an instructor-led process, that small group, that's very interactive, very collaborative, very social. We put a big focus on writing, because writing's a precursor to critical thinking, which is the precursor to problem solving. And so the students are used to a small group model, a very interactive model, in many ways a very traditional model that goes back hundreds of years. We employ the Socratic Method both online and on ground. And we employ it because we want students to be very active participants. And so whether it's ground or online, I think we also have an advantage because of that model. Faculty members are used to building interaction in the classroom. They're used to building relationships in the classroom. They know their students' names. There's not a lecture hall with 700 students led by a faculty assistant. We have teaching faculty members who are most often full professors in a small group model. And so that transition using our learning platform plus Zoom was not as unnatural as people might think. In fact, in many ways, it became just as interactive as if you're in a physical brick and mortar classroom. The faculty members were already used to asking questions, probing the students, and the students interacting with each other. And so it's interesting because if I ask 10 students, why do you like Grand Canyon? You know, we've had this tremendous growth that you alluded to. What do you like best about it? 9 out of the 10 students will say, we love the community on campus, the caring, the compassion, the inclusiveness, how personal it is. And part of that is because of our academic model. And so whatever happens on the campus is really reinforced in that classroom as students and faculty become very close during the course of a semester because they get to know each other.
So let me ask, let me transition a little bit into the fact that summer classes are coming up, and before you know it, fall classes are going to be here. And so I guess let me ask you, what's your plan for your on-campus students for the summer and for the fall?
Well, for the summer, we did transition all of the classes to an online platform. And so we thought that was the best thing. And we have over 90% of the classes we were going to offer in the summer could be offered online. You know, probably less than 10% of our classes now just can't be offered online. Things in nursing program, in the pre-med program, and engineering program, but 90% of what we were going to offer in the summer could be offered online, and so we transitioned that way. We were talking earlier, the fall will probably be the single biggest challenge of all the challenges that we've ever faced, will be this fall, this semester. We intend to open our campus in the fall at the time we typically open it. And we have formed 11 work groups, and we're examining every aspect, literally, of what we do. What happens in the classroom, what happens in the residence halls, what happens in the restaurants, what happens in the gyms, the pools, the athletic facilities. All of that has been formed into 11 work groups, and we are going to put a very comprehensive plan together with the goal that the vibrancy of the campus, the community of the campus, that experience that students love, they'll still have, but within the framework of this pandemic, this virus, and what we know we need to do to keep people safe. And so, you know, the students aren't as susceptible to long-term health concerns as, for example, our professors are. And so,
I'm sorry, you're saying that, you know, the demographics that are really susceptible to complications if they get COVID-19 are the older populations and those that have underlying health conditions. If you're a healthy, you know, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old student, you're not as susceptible. In fact, you know, all the data bear that. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
So you have one problem on one hand, your students are going to be okay. I'm sorry. So you don't have a problem on the one hand, or less of a problem. Your students are going to be okay. You have professors, though, that may be in that demographics, and maybe they're not going to be okay if they're exposed.
Oh, absolutely. So what we have to think about is we're going to have about 14,000 students living on campus in our residence halls. We're going to have another 10,000 students that will be commuters. We'll have another 3,000 or 4,000 people that will be coming on campus during the day and then leaving at night and coming back again. So it's going to be roughly split between the people who live there full time and those that come in the morning, leave at night, and then come back. We have to look at all of that to make sure that we are going to create an environment that provides the maximum level of safety, but with the same level of academic rigor and the same level of, or a similar level of vibrancy in terms of the rest of the community. That's not going to be easy, but it is going to be a test of the strength of our community. And I think it will be a very valuable learning experience for 19-year-olds because yes, they're not as susceptible, but some are. And so to those students, we're already saying, if you have underlying conditions, if you that make this a dangerous situation for you, your class you should stay home, and your class will be delivered to you online. If you're not worried about that and you want to be on campus, which most of them do, we're going to have to train our student leaders to be real leaders on campus and really help 19-year-olds to understand that, yeah, you wear a mask, not as much to protect yourself, but to protect the people that you're around. And yes, the 65-year-old professor is equally as important to our community. And so we may have to Zoom them. We may have to video them. So there's a lot of things that we've got to figure out in the next 90 days. But we're going to work very hard at it. And we believe we'll get to the point where come August 1st or so, we'll be ready.
So I want to ask Hank about that, because if you have you're trying to maintain the academic rigor, right? And that's, I can't imagine that has to be your highest priority as an academic institution, which is to maintain your academic rigor. In a traditional setting, right, you have student groups that help each other, very immediately, right? So you have clubs, you have, you can meet up, anywhere on the campus and sort of help each other out. So there's that student support system that's immediately available if you're all there on the campus. That's not going to be well, let me back up. That might change a little bit, right? So, I can see at Costco when I go there, or the last time I was there, they have plexiglasses, right? And so they have all these safety precautions that they've already installed. And I do wonder how you maintain the academic rigor that you want to maintain in a modified setting.
Sure. So, as Brian said, we have a couple of foundational pieces. We have faculty that have taught fully online for over 10 years in a different model of only online. We have studied that. We have 2 journals, and we publish, our faculty publish and study interactions to maximize learning outcomes. As well as what happened in the transition, we were able to study the impact of that learning and how to maximize that learning and try to create this similar experience. It's not going to be the same. But for instance, our students at the end of the semester, many of them have capstone projects where they have to present to large groups. We were able, with Zoom and Loom and Noom and Doom, there's many different technologies, but Zoom was one of the major ones, was to be able to help students still bring that community together and to interact. Yes, it's a little different, the 2D versus 3D, being there with the person and us looking at a flat screen, but we studied those things, and now what we're doing is we actually started with the surveys of our students and our faculty. We're crunching that data. We're also getting the qualitative data from our faculty experience and our student experience, so that we can build the model out to maximize the learning, but the learning experience, because that's a really important part of it. It's not only the content knowledge. So how can we have the interaction where maybe the faculty member is not in that classroom, but the TV screen is in there in Zoom, but maybe we have an IA we assign to that classroom that now assists. So Brian will always invest in the student learning. So maybe we put an IA in that classroom.
What's an IA? Sorry, what's an IA?
Instructional assistant.
Okay, got it.
So you have a small class, you don't necessarily need an instructional assistant if everything's face-to-face, the professor's there. But now maybe the professor's not there because we have to protect them and their health and their safety. So maybe there we add an IA. We understand that we have a learning platform, we have the interactions we're looking for, and we would space out our classrooms. And the amount of time that people spend in there, and balance that with how much they spend online and the work they do there. So we're taking what we learned from the last 10 to 12 years, but what we really learned in this transition, and now we're going to apply that to the fall semester to maximize learning and the learning experience.
So you mentioned physical distancing for the professors, a way of maintaining that, especially if they're older. Maybe physical distancing within the classroom. You're trying to figure that one out. I do wonder how you figure that one out. You have a confined space, you know. It's not very elastic, if you will.
Well, and these are just ideas at this point. So, you know, the kind of thing we're thinking about. So say a classroom fits 30 students. Now that fits 10 on 3 different days, and some of the other students are participating online and watching virtually, but then they can have time in the class. If the professor has no comorbid positions and is healthy and wants to teach in the class, they will be there, you know, X amount of days. So that's where now the devil's in the details of really figuring out that, again, to protect our students, but to maximize learning and to do those the same. Brian wants to maybe add to some of that.
Brian, let me ask you about the health of the faculty members, right? So it's immensely paramount that you keep your faculty healthy. If they're not healthy, they can't teach. One of the things that I think may be able to help is if there's widespread testing, not just for, you know, whether you have a COVID-19, but whether maybe you have antibodies. And I've heard debates, you know, pro and cons of that. But that may be a tool for you know, not just for GCU, but other universities, and quite frankly, for companies as well, and try to see if their members may have the antibodies already, so they're freely able to move and not have to worry about getting COVID-19. They've gotten it and they're really immune to it.
From everything we're reading, listening to, experts we're seeking out, that antibody testing is really going to be a key, we all think. And that will be a baseline at the beginning of the semester. So if we know that we have professors that have gotten it and that are now have the antibody and they're going to be pretty safe, there's a baseline of people we know we can really use in the classroom more or less in a full-time methodology. For those that haven't and are older, we're going to have to make some adaptations. And Hank gave some examples of those possible adaptations. It'll be a point in time that you know, it's going to be very interesting because certainly nobody wants this. Nobody's enjoying this. This is not a good thing. But it is one of those challenges that is going to force us to think very deeply about how we do things and how things can get done in the future with maybe greater levels of flexibility. Just before we shut down in the spring semester, I ran into 2 students that I know well. One of them was in our student government, and they were going backpacking in Colorado. And they were taking their laptops with them, and they were very good students, and they were going to complete the next 4 weeks of their classroom, of their classes, and I'm sure they did a great job. I don't have any doubt about that. It dawned on them that we've got some flexibility here. Might be pretty safe in the mountains. We like backpacking, and so, you know, there's going to be a lot, and I'm not trying to de-emphasize the severity of this because nobody wants this. But it's at times like this that a lot of times some sacred cows, some things that have been in existence for decades, we find maybe aren't as important as we thought they were. And there are other things that we find out can be even more important. And so as we move through this and learn how to live as a community of 25 to 30,000 people on our campus on a daily basis, there'll be a lot of thinking, there'll be a lot of discussion, there'll be a lot of experimenting, and hopefully the strength of the community will cause us to do this very effectively and also to do a lot of learning about how we do things.
Sorry, let me ask you, how do you, I know there's a lot of, you know, things are being discussed, and you're trying to find the most innovative ways to kind of replicate what you had before going into the fall when things may not be the same, right? But I do wonder how you try and do that for campus activities. Whether that, I don't know whether that's, you know, that's, again, I go back, watching a soccer game or playing soccer or going to the gym or having concerts.
So we've got, as Brian mentioned, a number of subgroups that are meeting, that are starting to meet regularly right now to kind of work through all those details, because as both have alluded to, there are times when, you know, something might be able to happen with physical distancing measures in place, or if the antibody test shows that we have, you know, enough of a population where some events can continue. So we're kind of in this waiting period of really just exploring all the different options, but trying to provide the best possible experience that Grand Canyon University has become known for to our students.
What about, just throwing out an idea, what about masks? What have you, are you thinking of maybe even handing masks to your students if they go to like a concert hall, or, you know, if there's a larger grouping that's going to happen?
Sure. So this is probably a good example. We have our tours right now are almost 100% done through our virtual platform, through a GCU Live kind of experience for folks. And they've been very, very popular. So we've been very busy. But we're talking about what that transition looks like when we go back to having a tour guide with an actual family, what that experience would look like. So anyway, GCU, through our own kind of infrastructure, we have a promotions company. We also have a lot of 3D printing access through our engineering program. And so several weeks ago, we began preparing for that and started printing and creating our own forms of equipment. So we have cloth masks that we have actually been using both for employees who are staying on campus now, but we are in the middle of providing that or creating that so that we have enough for students if on campus, and then also, for example, in our tours. It's really cool. We took some old t-shirts that we had in our promotions company, and they created masks. And we also have a fundraiser going on right now that employees are kind of contributing at their own expense, and some donors who are coming alongside, and GCU's matching, and GCE both are matching that contribution 100%. And so I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we're very close to hitting our goal. And we're anticipating having more than enough cloth masks, the face shields, and that respirator, that N95-like mask available for our students in the fall, and also for any partners that are working with the university, especially for our nursing students.
So the goal might be to scale that, your production of your own mask, and try to see if you can.
Yeah, we've been producing in anticipation of what will be.
Let me ask you a question from one of our viewers. What do accommodations and support services look like for students with disabilities in this flipped, classroom format? For GCU, it's not so much of a flip because you've been using it, but how do professors work with students or accommodate them and create platforms for equity and access?
Sure, Brian, I could answer that one. We have the Student with Disability Service, and we provide services for the online students, 85,000. We've been doing that for a number of years, as well as for the traditional ground students. So they have the knowledge and the equipment and the capability. So since we can do that for 85,000 students, those that transferred from the ground that had specific issues, they were able to just make those accommodations and make sure they had the equipment to be able to do that, so the learning could continue. So we've been there for them, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you. So let me shift to beyond summer and beyond fall, right? Because I do wonder to what extent the changes that you've adapted today, and not just GCU, not just the universities and colleges, but a lot of companies, a lot of folks both in the public and in private sectors have had to adjust. I do wonder to what extent those adjustments become permanent, and more specifically as to the university and the college setting, how this change that we've kind of forced into doing, what changes will permeate into the future, and what does college education then look like, not just this year, but the next years? Let me ask Brian.
Well, it's a good question, and I think we're in the middle of a transition here. I think a transformation from a higher ed standpoint. It's been going on for 20 or 30 years, where we've realized that higher education used to be almost exclusively for that 18 to 20-year-old student. Graduate high school, go to college, prepare for life and work. Because of the fast economic change that takes place today, because people are going to be in as many as 7 or 8 different jobs or careers in their lifetime, it became obvious that higher education needed to address the needs of people across the lifespan. And so that's been happening. Innovative delivery models that adjust to people's lifestyle and where they are in their life have been coming for a long time. What we have to do now is really a couple things. One, we have to make sure that we are developing academic programs that are being developed in light of where the jobs are, where the economy is going, and where the jobs are going to be. That's really important. There are, for example, 300,000 cybersecurity jobs available today that pay on average $92,000 a year, and they're unfilled. And so that's a program that has to be a very prolific program offered at a lot of universities, delivered online, delivered on ground, because across industries, people need cybersecurity experts. In our schools, schools are really working hard to understand autism and the needs of autistic kids, because that is such a fast growth area. And so developing programs to educate current students and even new students that are going to be teachers to deal with the problems of autism is something that needs to be proliferated through our educational system. And then, as important as that is, to make sure that we're delivering it in innovative ways that are cost effective. The cost of living has gone up in this country 100% since 1992, but the cost of higher education has gone almost 400%. Students are taking on too much debt. Programs are taking too long. It's ironic that in the age of the internet, when data and information and content is available at everybody's fingertips throughout the world, higher education has actually created longer programs. And so I think as we move forward, these things were happening, but people will be making more and more practical decisions about college. And they'll be looking for universities that have innovative delivery models, that are cost effective, that help, that are very, especially for traditional students, based in project work, in internships, and very practical experiences, whether it's engineering, computer science, healthcare, etc. And so, again, nobody wanted this to happen, but I think what's going to happen as a result is that it's going to force us to meet these challenges in a way that is very customer-centric, very oriented to who the student is, what the student's needs are, what the needs of the economy are. All of those things are going to be addressed in more and more and more very specific ways.
Do you foresee, let me back up. So, I went to a traditional campus, right? I formed lifelong relationships there. In fact, that's where I met my wife, who was back in the university. And so, yeah, that's a lifelong relationship right there. But you do make friends. And, when you're a teenager going into your 20s, it's kind of like the best time to really have, to meet friends, to explore the world. And part of that exploration is the on-campus setting. And that's the way we've been doing it for decades. And it has real value to people to be in that setting. Do you foresee a migration even for GCU's traditional on-campus students to online day for the 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old students?
That's I get asked that question a lot. People they visit the university and they look at our technical infrastructure. We put $250 million into building very, very advanced systems to deliver learning, to analyze learning, to analyze the learning outcomes, to make faculty members more effective. We have 85,000 students studying fully online, and they say, why are you building these residence halls? You've built 25 residence halls in the last 10 years. Why do you have 32 restaurants? Why do you have these swimming pools and these intramural facilities, including soccer facilities? What's the purpose in all that when this is all going technical? And my response always is, I think students that are 18 and 19 years old need that experience that you explained more than they ever have. I think it's more valuable than it's ever been. A lot of reasons, but let me give one. Because our tuition's been very affordable, our campus is very diverse. And so 28% Hispanic, 8% African Americans, more than 40% students of color. Students are coming from all over the country and from all over the world, and they're coming to on our campus as 18 and 19-year-olds, and they're learning how to understand, appreciate each other's culture. They're learning how to live together. They're learning to be respectful of differences. It just can't be at $50,000 or $60,000 a year. It can't be at $200,000 worth of debt. And so fortunately at GCU, we've got the 85,000 working adult students online, the 22,000 students on ground that is going to grow to 30,000, and they're leveraging a common infrastructure. That's created huge efficiencies. And so what we've been able to do, because of those two large student bodies leveraging a common infrastructure, we've made it affordable. And so I agree with you 100%. I met my wife in college. Many of us did. Many of us still have friends we met in college. It was 4 of the best years of our life. That experience should not be taken away from kids, but it can't be at $200,000 worth of debt. And when people look at universities' growth from 900 to 22,000, in fact, I just met with our parent council yesterday. And I wanted to know how they were feeling about their sons and their daughters coming back to campus in the fall. We're seeking as much input as we can. They're so excited about their sons and daughters coming back to campus. They can't wait for that to happen. They know how much it means to them to be back on campus, to be with their friends, to be part of that community. And so that emphasized to me how critical that thing is. We're just going to have to be, we're going to be challenged by, we got to create that thing in a safe environment. But you're absolutely right. We don't want to take that experience away from kids going forward. It just has to be affordable.
So we have a couple other questions here from our viewers and listeners. So for rural Arizona students where there is limited broadband, how do you work with them to ensure they have access to GCU's online platform? I mean,
yeah. Sure. I think that's what Sarah mentioned before. For the students that went back, the hotspots of using the cell towers or access that someone might have had in their community, whether a library or some other opportunity or a family member, we made sure that they had that access, and we reached out to them right away when we heard that they did have an issue. So again, some of it we provided, some of it we made sure they could be connected with resources in their community so it could be seamless.
So I have a follow-up question. And I don't know what an articulation agreement necessarily is, but what is, do you have articulation agreements or other arrangements, perhaps that's it, other arrangements with rural Arizona community colleges? If so, how do they work? And if not, how would you set up such arrangements?
So I'll start and I'll let Sarah can give a little more detail in this. The quick answer is yes. We academically, and then with Sarah's team, we work very closely with many community colleges to really, that's part of Brian's vision is if you can transfer, let's maximize transferring credits when you complete a associate's degree to the university so you can get a job. And we want to work with the students in a very clear fashion so that we're maximizing their opportunity to get to work sooner. And those agreements with community colleges is very important. And Sarah, please maybe give a little more color on that.
Sure. We definitely work with all the community colleges in the state of Arizona. And in many cases, we have articulation agreements set up program to program so students know exactly what their transfer credit situation looks like. And in the event we have not articulated an exact program, students can go to our website and we have information there that lets them know within minutes what their transfer credit situation looks like. And so we're always seeking to articulate more programs so that it is more transparent for students.
I'm sorry. So when you say articulation, I think you, correct me if I'm wrong, you mean your ability to then, that arrangement that allows a community college, to, a student who's going to a community college to transfer those credits. So he's, when he or she's going to GCU, you know, he doesn't have, or he or she doesn't have to retake those classes.
That's right. So it's just kind of a document that is between two institutions that outlines, okay, even if the student comes 2 years from now, we will take these credits for these credits.
Here's another question. How would you compare your online model to other universities who have online programs, and what is unique about your model? And as a follow-up question, what consideration have you given to taking the GCU model to other universities, and maybe more importantly to local community colleges? I guess we're talking about sharing of platforms, maybe.
Well, I'll start out with that, and maybe Hank, you can add on. I talked about it a little bit before, but I think one of the very unique features of GCU's, online program, and we were known as innovators from an online perspective, and referred to as non-traditional as a result of that. But the reality is that our academic model is very traditional. It's very traditional in terms of how people perceived higher education in general 100 years ago. The focus is on the faculty member and the faculty member leading the educational process, so we call that instructor-led. It's a very small group format, even though it's online and you could put 1,000 people in the classroom. We don't do it. The internet is primarily a communication tool, probably the greatest communication tool in the world. And so much of higher education, much of education period, is about interaction. It's about communication. And so we've created an instructor-led small group model that's very interactive, very collaborative, very discussion-based, very social, but there's a big focus on writing. Certainly we do testing, but there is a big focus on writing because we want people to make practical application. We want to expand their ability to think critically. We think higher education should be about writing, because it's the precursor to critical thinking, which is the precursor to problem solving, and we need to be creating problem solvers, and you can't do that when students just take tests. You've got to get them to articulate their thinking. They've got to be able to put their thoughts on paper in a way that can be explanatory and persuasive and creative. And so that kind of has been the hallmark of how we've thought about delivering education, both online and on ground, but it's kind of a unique feature of what we do. But I would like to have Hank expand on that as well, if you would.
Right, and Hank, I'm sorry, if you could also answer the question of the potential of sharing your platform with other universities and maybe other community colleges if you're not already doing it.
Sure. So I'll answer quickly and then turn it back to Brian. The only thing I want to give is sort of a metaphor. You can teach a face-to-face classroom with 500 students in a lecture hall with someone standing at the front. Or you can teach a face-to-face classroom with 10 students sitting around a circle with a faculty member, dialoguing, discussing, writing, sharing ideas. The same thing about online. Online is not just online, because there are some people delivering online like MOOCs, which is, I would say, of 500 people sitting, no real interpersonal interaction, no real dialogic going on there in terms of that. Or you can do it, as Brian has described beautifully, that small group instructor-led work that goes on with a lot of writing. So that's really important. And then the other piece about platforms and sharing, Brian, I'll throw that back to Brian.
Well, yeah, so we have 23 partners currently. And those 23 partners we are working with, and we purchased actually a company called Orbis that's now part of Grand Canyon Education. But there's they have, and now we have taken a very innovative approach to developing nurses. We're going to need 1 million additional nurses in the next 5 years in this country, and the universities aren't producing them. This new model takes baccalaureate prepared people and puts them into our online platform to take prereqs. If they qualify, they get into a 16-month nursing program that, from a didactic perspective, that's all delivered online. And then they also attend a laboratory for that part of the experience. But that's an example of us sharing our learning with 23 other partners so that they can deliver nursing education in a very innovative way in order to prepare the nurses we are going to need in the next 5 years. We are in dialogue with a number of universities around the country who want us to help them put their programs online. And we haven't formalized any of those relationships to date, but we are in serious discussions, and those discussions have picked up now because universities are concerned about their enrollment numbers. They're concerned about their financial viability. They've watched what we've been able to do in terms of not only growing our student bodies, but keeping tuition low. And so they're asking us for assistance in doing that with their programs. And we'll probably in the next number of months be announcing that we've got some additional partnerships in addition to these nursing partnerships where we're helping universities do that.
I think we are out of time, and I do wanna ask you one question, just real briefly, all three of you. What has been the best thing that's emerged out of this crisis that we're facing? What's the silver lining? Just a few words or a few phrases, if you will. Let's start with Sarah.
For me, it's the level of innovation for my team. We had to change very quickly to a different way of recruiting students and servicing students from a distance, and just to see the innovation on literally a daily basis from them and what's coming of this, I see long-term changes happening as a result.
Hank?
Yeah, I think it's just reinforces the dedication of our faculty at GCU. They took off the summer break. They came in the spring break. They made sure they were here. They created as much as possible for the student success. It's their dedication and the knowledge of everyone to do this really well and to measure the outcomes. And it's just so heartening to be a part of a team like that.
Brian?
I'm going to echo what Hank just said. It's teamwork and it's passion. We have a group of about 150 people that are meeting 2 or 3 times a week. They've been divided into 11 work groups. And the passion that people have to attack this in a way that allows us to serve our students the way we have in the past, the passion to do that, to do it as a team, and to deliver excellence to our students and our families is incredibly heartening to watch.
And with that, Sarah, Brian, Hank, thank you so much for your time. To people who attended, joined us via your computers, your phones, your tablets, or via the phone, thank you for spending your morning with us. To me, the silver lining to all of this is the ability to just spend every day with my kid for the past 1 month now, 24/7, nonstop, and it's been such a real joy. Thank you again, and you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
All right.
Thanks.